Hey guys, it's Becky with Design Bundles, and today I'm here to talk to you about a very popular question that I get asked. Do I need to purchase a Cricut or do I need to purchase a Silhouette Cameo? Now, first let me say that both of these are really awesome machines. I do not believe that you can go wrong. I often compare them Apple versus Android. And the reason I do that is because in the end, for most things, these two machines will accomplish the same task. The biggest difference is going to be the software. So we are going to do a side-by-side comparison and just give you our overview of which machine may handle which task, or what you may look for as a benefit in one machine, strengths and weaknesses. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So first and foremost, let's talk about the physical construction. Okay, now I am not saying that the Cameo is weak by any stretch of the imagination, but there's something to be said about just being extra solid. All right, I always love how solid the Cricut machines feel, and if you were to weigh them, all right, by comparison, you would definitely feel that the Cricut machine is sturdier. Okay, now like I said, I'm not saying that the Cameo 4 is weak, but that's just something that I observed as soon as I took the Cricut Maker out of the box. Okay, now when we're talking about construction, if we open them up, you will notice that the setup is mostly the same. They both have the two separate blade housings. All right, they both have rollers. They both have little trays. Okay, now one upgrade that the Silhouette Cameo got over the Cameo 3 is that it does have a built-in roll feeder. Okay, so we can get into that a little bit more in a different video, but unfortunately the Cricut does not have a built-in roll feeder. In addition to that, the Cameo 4 has movable rollers so that you can move them inside. And what that means is that you can cut vinyl straight off of the roll without a mat. Okay, now that is a really big benefit for me. Now I have heard little birdies tell me that you can in fact cut vinyl without a mat on a Cricut. Now it is true, I did it with my little Cricut Joy, and as you can see, you actually do have rollers that are meant to hold your mat in place. So if you were to have material that was 12.5, maybe 13 inches wide, you would have to measure that out. But if you were to have wide enough material, I have faith that the Cricut could do the same thing. But there's no modifications needed to your material to be able to do that with the Cameo 4. Also, the software limits you. You can still only input software that is 12 by 24 inches on the Cricut Maker in the design space. Okay, but the Silhouette Cameo, Silhouette Studio will let you basically choose your own material size. Now, obviously, it's going to pick up the limits and say, hey, we can only cut 12 inches wide, but you can, in fact, line up a roll of vinyl here and cut, and the vinyl will continue to feed out the back for at least 10 feet, okay? I do believe that 10 feet is the limit. But, that's just a really big difference for me between these two. Now, are there really a lot of situations where you're going to need something that's longer than 24 inches? Maybe, maybe not. Now, if we're talking about a stencil or something that has separate letters, well then of course the Cricut is just fine because you can piece those together. But it's really tempting to give the Cameo the hand up in this because it just makes it super easy, that it will take care of it for you and there's no piecing required, okay? Now, in addition to that, let's talk about connectivity. I do absolutely love that both of these machines are Bluetooth. Now, I'm just going to put in a little plug that I wasn't real impressed with the Bluetooth on the Cameo 3, and unfortunately I think a lot of Silhouette users felt the same, but I'm happy to report that I have no serious connectivity issues on the Cameo 4. Okay, it connects with my Bluetooth on my computer, and it works really, really well. But in this area, I would say that the Cricut actually has more flawless Bluetooth. I have never had any connectivity issues with my Cricut Bluetooth. And unfortunately, not that I've had connection issues per se, but there does seem to be a delay at times when I'm sending files to my Cameo 4. Now, if you're not in a big hurry, that's really not a big deal for you because it does eventually start cutting. But I have found that to be frustrating at times. Now, I do acknowledge that different computers will have different Bluetooth software, hardware, whatever you want to call it, because I'm not a tech expert with computers, but I will recognize that this could be a connectivity concern with my computer. So I'm not going to blame the Cameo 4 for that, but I just know that I get a much more seamless connectivity with the Cricut Maker. So let's talk about materials. I will say that these two machines cut almost the exact same materials. There is nothing that I have cut on one or the other that I could not just as easily swapped around, okay? They both have rotary blades, they both have knife tools, they both have, just, I wanna say the same functions, all right? The really winner here, the way to determine the winner is to take a look at the software, because the software is also going to play a factor in what you can and cannot cut. And let me tell you why. Because one thing that I really like about my Cameo 4 is that I can etch. And when I talk about etch, I can etch on acrylic and I can etch on metal. Anything small enough I can feed into, lay it on my cutting mat, and with a special tool, the Cameo 4 will etch that. Now, the Cricut will also etch, but Cricut Design Space is not equipped to set up an etching file. So people who do a lot of serious etching on their Cricut Maker, of course your results are really, really great. I mean, the tool's there, the machine will do it, but what I see them doing, and there are actually entire Facebook groups dedicated to this, they have started using Silhouette Studio for setting up their file, and then they save that as an SVG file and bring it over here and use it with their Cricut Maker. Now, if you have questions on using Silhouette Studio with your Cricut Maker, we have a video on how to do that, so I will definitely try to link that below, but it will also be in our playlist, okay? But that's a really common theme that I see. The Cricut Maker, and this is another point over here, so point for Cricut, it is more plug and play, okay? You can go, you can buy a maker, and you can be cutting things today. Now, that can also be said for some, we'll say, tech savvy crafters who grab onto the Cameo 4, but the software is just more user friendly, in my opinion. I feel like they make things more to the point. There's not a whole lot of come over here, come over there, let's do this, let's do that. It is literally, here's your file, let's size it. And they even have a button that says, make it, okay? I just don't think it gets any easier than that. It will load it on the mat for you. There's no back and forth about make sure you set your material size, because it's all right there in the Make It panel for you, right? And for that reason, I do often recommend Cricut to hobbyists. Anybody who is just starting out and maybe they're on the fence, I usually say, hey, go ahead and start with a Cricut. But I let them know ahead of time. If you think that you will turn this into a serious hobby, maybe a business, anything like that, where you're gonna want to create your own SVG files or cut oversized images, or just overall have more availability, overall more projects and features that you can do, this software is what is going to grow with you. All right, so a lot of experienced Cricut users do eventually jump over and start using Silhouette Studio. Now, let's also hit another pause, because we start talking about doing some serious crafting. Well, I keep using Silhouette Studio as an example, but I do know that Cricut users will jump over and they will use Inkscape, they will use Adobe Illustrator, they will use their iPad. Okay, there are a lot of other software options, but I'm just saying, in my world, in Becky's world, all right, I see and I recommend a lot of Cricut users who are ready to make the next step, and they can still use their Cricut machine because it's still a good machine, but they jump over and they learn to work within the Silhouette software. And for roughly $60, you can upgrade to the business edition, and you can now use Silhouette Studio to design and then bring it over into Design Space and cut with your Cricut. Okay, so like I said, they cut the same materials, but the software is what's limiting. So I also include that as a drawback to the Silhouette Cameo. Because it has such a robust software, a lot of beginners can find the software overwhelming. They get discouraged, maybe it's not doing what it's supposed to do, what they feel that it should be doing, and I see a lot of that in the Facebook groups, and it's very unfortunate. So, just something to keep in mind, that a robust software is really good for some and not so good for others. So it's both a benefit and a drawback, unfortunately. Now, let's also talk about some other common beginner problems. The auto blade. When I originally did my unveiling of my Cameo 4, my unboxing video, I said that I got a great cut with my auto blade, and for that project I did. Unfortunately, I did start experiencing options, and please do not hate me for saying this, but I have switched back to a ratchet blade because it's my tried and true fallback method, okay? Now, with that being said, I have not had any problems with the blade in the Cricut, and it is an auto adjusting blade also. So that's not to say that a lot of people don't have really good success with the Cameo 4 or even the Cameo 3 auto blade. A lot of people did. Unfortunately, I was not one of those people. So if you're a beginner and you're listening to this, have a ratchet blade as a backup. They are, under $8 if you buy them online, and it's just a good option because I just find a lot of beginners, if they're having problems cutting, they don't understand why their project isn't working, switch out your auto blade and see if that is the problem. Okay? Now let's talk about durability. I will say a lot of people, for whatever reason, now I have never had to contact Silhouette America's support. Okay, I've never had to chat with them, I've never had to email them, but I have heard that is a little difficult to try to get troubleshooting help or a replacement machine on your Cameo. Now, I've heard the opposite with Cricut, and there have even been some very benevolent posts talking about, somebody who lost their Cricut in a house fire, and somebody from Cricut sees that and they send them a new machine. Now, I'm not saying that couldn't happen with Silhouette, and maybe they do and I just don't see them. So, just things to keep in mind. I just know that Cricut really, really stands behind their machines. And while Silhouette seems to also stand behind their machines, people just report that there are more hoops to jump through and, maybe just some issues along the way that could be improved on with the Silhouette Cameos. So let's talk about how easy it is to use images. Okay, now both of these softwares, they have built-in design stores. Now with Cricut, you get Cricut Access. It's a monthly fee and you get access to those projects. With the Silhouette Studio, you have the Silhouette Design Store, and you can also sign up for a subscription. And while you only get a certain number of downloads, the subscription is very similar to Cricut Access. Another difference is that whatever you purchase with your Silhouette Design Store subscription, you get to keep that if you cancel your subscription. Whereas with Cricut Access, if you cancel your monthly subscription, then you are going to lose access to maybe some of those files that you have learned to depend upon if you make them for gifts or whatnot quite often. Okay, so keep your files, lose your files. But either way, that service is available, and if you just know what you're looking at going into it, then that's really not a big deal. Both of the softwares, you can purchase designs from outside sources and bring them in. Both of the softwares, you can also bring in clip art. Now, I will say that on the clip art function and even the SVG function, Silhouette Design Space has a little bit of an advantage because it makes working with clip art to me a little bit easier. It will automatically pick up on transparent backgrounds, and it will bring it in as a print and cut, and it's just a little bit more intuitive with that. Whereas the Silhouette Studio, you can bring in whatever clip art and patterns that you want, but you have to do a little bit more research or know a little bit more, use a little bit more brain power to know how to manipulate the image to do what you want. For example, you might have to do a little bit of tracing, or you might have to crop or modify your image. With that being said, also using SVG files, Cricut Design Space, you can use those right off the bat, whereas Silhouette Studio, you would need to upgrade to Designer Edition or higher. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't use files with your Silhouette Cameo without upgrading. What that means is you have to look for a DXF format. And that's okay, because most designers have caught on to this, and lately it's pretty rare that you find an SVG file that is not also available in a DXF format. So just something to know, but that used to be one of the main reasons that people would upgrade. So speaking of upgrades, well, of course we have a video on upgrades, but I also like that Silhouette Studio comes with those upgrades. All right, Design Space is like a one-shot deal. What you get with Design Space from day one is what you get with Design Space on day 100. Whereas you can unlock more features if you decide that you want to pay for those features. Now again, those features can be overwhelming. So if you're a beginner, you may not be ready to upgrade yet, but just know that those features are there and they are available for you to unlock. And another issue that a lot of people talk about is that the Cricut requires online connectivity. Now, Cricut did get on board, and they have the software now to where you can download a version of the software onto your computer and use it to cut with your Cricut. The only downside to that is that when you are looking to bring in SVG files, or, obviously access your library, but even just accessing and bringing in your own designs, you do still need that internet connectivity. Now, you can use shapes and set up your own designs right there in Design Space, but if you're not connected to the internet, then you are not able to bring in images from the outside, okay? Whereas the Silhouette Cameo and Silhouette Studio are completely offline. Unless you are going to access the Silhouette Design Store, or you want to access images that you have saved onto your cloud, then you actually do not need internet at all to be able to work in Silhouette Studio or to be able to cut on your Cameo 4. And last but not least, let's talk about available materials. So, Cricut has things like the Cricut Infusible Ink, and they just came out with a new foil transfer sheet. The good thing is that in that aspect, it's not really a competition, because with both machines, you can interchange those materials, all right? So you want to learn how to use Infusible Ink, but you bought a Silhouette Cameo, that is a-okay, because you can buy Cricut Infusible Ink, cut it on your Cameo. You may have to do a little bit of testing with your cut settings to make sure that you get them right, but you can totally do it. In my experience, what I found, like I said in the beginning, there is nothing that you can cut on the Cricut that you can't cut on the Cameo, and vice versa. They're both powerful machines. They both have really good cut settings and test results as far as cutting different materials, and I would take either one of them, and obviously I have both. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video today. If you have any questions about the machines, or you have questions about using Silhouette Studio with your Cricut, maybe you have questions about specific projects that you want to do, feel free to leave those in the comments below. I do come back and check in with you guys, make sure I answer any questions you have, and make sure you subscribe to the channel, because as always, we have a lot of really great ideas for you right around the corner. Thanks guys, we'll see you next time.